So, what have we shown in Building 7? Well, we've shown direct evidence of explosives because we have sights and sounds produced by explosions with the eyewitnesses you've seen, a rapid onset of the destruction at the base, the clap of thunder, and the building coming down, those huge dust clouds billowing, enormous, from the pulverized concrete, the cutter charges or pools of molten iron from thermite, and we're going to be proving later that this is from thermite. Squibs, or explosive charges, visible at the upper 7 stories on the right side of Building 7. Deal with it. Demolition waves, removing the column support simultaneously all around the building, floor by floor, synchronistically timed. And a total collapse of the steel skeleton broken up and ready for shipment. All of that producing a straight down symmetrical collapse into its own footprint, free fall speed, virtually. No resistance from the columns. We have no typical characteristics of fire with large deformations creeping from place to place and slow deformations or asymmetrical collapse as we see in fires. We have government documentation which shows that they have no hypothesis that they value themselves, FEMA. We have expert corroboration from one controlled demolition expert, the top in Europe. We have foreknowledge of the collapse, that it's going to blow up, that they're moving the command center away, they're moving people back like 7 blocks. And of course, we have plenty of video documentation which you've seen, all of which goes to support the hypothesis of controlled demolition. Now, no building exhibiting all the characteristics of controlled demolition has never not been a controlled demolition.
What you're seeing are high shots. Now, here we're going to show you a videotape of the collapse itself.
Describe that.
Now we go to videotape, the collapse of this building.
It's amazing.
Amazing, incredible, pick your word. For the 3rd time today, it's reminiscent of those pictures we've all seen too much on television before when a building was deliberately destroyed by well-placed dynamite to knock it down.
I was amazed. It follows. And I'd look now at dozens of demolitions just to see what they look like, what is the nature, experiments on how you bring a building down symmetrically, straight down and rapidly. You knock out the core first, the core goes down, the sidewalls lean in a little bit, and the building comes down rapidly because you've knocked out the support. Well, that's exactly how Building 7 came down. The dramatic collapse of World Trade Center 7 is something everyone ought to see. I suspect that few have actually looked at it to date. It's very dramatic. It would be helpful actually to show a demolition of some other building, which we know is controlled demolition. So you can see how it dips in the middle and comes straight down and rapidly. And also you see coming off the sides these jets of gas and debris, smoke puffing out of there. And that's very typical of explosive demolition. All these characteristics, the straight down fall and the rapid fall. And then you would look at, for comparison, Building 7, and you can see what I mean. It really does look like an explosive demolition. Something that needs to be explored very carefully, but the characteristics are there. So you look at the building, you see it dip in the middle first, and the sides bow in a little bit, and then you see it come down. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, just like that. And right down onto its footprint. You see, that's the goal of controlled demolition. You don't want the building to tip over, which is much easier to do with explosives, actually. Just knock out the supports and let her tip. The trusses in the building made it very asymmetrical. There were 24 central columns, steel columns. And for those to fail in such a way that that building would collapse in the center first and then come straight down, instead of toppling over, for instance, no.
The entire roofline cascades downward neatly into its own footprint. At the same time, jets of debris can be seen shooting out of the walls and going up floor by floor. After viewing this video, NIST can simply declare, NIST has seen no evidence that the collapse of World Trade Center 7 was caused by bombs, missiles, or controlled demolition.
In the FEMA report, I think they were fairly honest. And it's interesting as you read what they said about Building 7. So, you know, I'm reading with great interest. At the end, they say, well, our best hypothesis. Now, this is the fire and damage hypothesis. That's the only hypothesis they looked at seriously. Okay, so our best hypothesis, they said, has only a very a low probability of occurrence. And I'm saying, that's right. That's exactly right. Why don't you quantify that? But they didn't quantify it. Oh. But they did admit, you know, it has only a low probability of occurrence, and that's to their credit. The 9/11 Commission didn't even mention Building 7.
Silverstein, a commercial real estate tycoon with international political connections, acquired a 99-year lease on the World Trade Center complex in the spring of 2001. Throughout the summer, he reworked the insurance policies on his new property, making sure that it was covered for acts of terrorism. Explicit in the lease agreement was Silverstein's right to rebuild the complex if it were destroyed. After 9/11, Mr. Silverstein fought his insurers in court to obtain double his policy limits for the destruction of his property, maintaining that the double hijacking constituted 2 disasters caused by terrorists, not just one. In all, he collected over $8 billion, a magnificent return on his original $14 million investment.
My first reaction is to...
Similarly, Larry Silverstein, new leaseholder of the World Trade Center, seems to have stated that a decision was made to pull Building 7 by the end of the day, the last structure added to the World Trade Center complex. Let's hear Mr. Silverstein's actual words, delivered for our benefit in the 2002 PBS documentary, America Rebuilds.
I remember getting a call from the fire department commander telling me that they were not sure they were going to be able to contain the fire. And I said, you know, we've had such terrible loss of life. Maybe the smartest thing to do is pull it. And they made that decision to pull, and then we watched the building collapse.
World Trade 7, functioning as the command center for the complex, housed giant diesel backup and oxygen systems, the mayor's protected emergency bunker, and offices for the CIA, Secret Service, Department of Defense, and Securities and Exchange Commission. Its other tenants were insurance companies, brokerages, and banks. No plane hit Building 7, but at 5:20 p.m. on September 11th, it collapsed in a heap on the ground. Also, in 6.5 seconds, lost forever were thousands of SEC case files on corporate fraud, including those relating to the notorious activities of giants WorldCom and Enron. A few indictments for stock fraud, but what of the $70 billion California electricity swindle? But somehow, rescue workers knew that Building 7 would fall.
You hear that? Keep your eye on that building. It'll be coming down soon.
They said, hey, you know, like, you got to stay behind this line because they're thinking about taking this building down. They're not sure if it's stable or not. So they were holding a line off because they had knowledge that something was going to happen.
Hey, get out of here. All right? Go.
In this live BBC footage from September 11th, reporter Jane Stanley announces the collapse of Building 7 while it is still intact in the window behind her. How did BBC know this in advance of the event?
Jane, what more